branches of the fragile vine, a harsh environment for your heart and mind. But you placed the heavy dome right above the dirt, shielding the delicate leaves from the daily hurt. The glass holds the moisture and it keeps the air warm, a safe little bubble in the middle of the storm. The frost traces patterns on the outside of the sphere, a fascinating barrier to eradicate the fear. The temperature drops in the center of the room, but the enclosed garden has a space to safely bloom. The glass arc bending the light around the frame. You do not ask the winter to apologize and fade. You protect the foundation in the shelter you made. I do not have to shiver when the cold weather drops. You cover my roots and the shivering stops. The glass arc bending the light around the frame. You do not ask the winter to apologize and fade. You protect the foundation in the shelter you made. I do not have to shiver when the cold weather drops. You cover my roots and the shivering stops. People try to build a fire to combat the freeze, scorching the delicate branches on the trees. But fire leaves an ash and an unpredictable burn, a devastating lesson that the fragile ones learn. You trust the simple physics of a curved barrier, transparent roof acting as a steady carrier. The condensation builds and waters the dry earth, a masterpiece of shielding in inevitable birth. Rest the heavy glass, keep the winter out. Let the vaporize silence all the doubt. The dome is an armor without an iron face. I am growing safe inside a designated space. I realize that loving is a transparent shield, a willingness to isolate a vulnerable field. You didn't ask to change the nature of the tender shoot. You built a microclimate for the fragile little root. I reach my green leaves toward the filtered morning rays, trusting the enclosure as I navigate the day. The tempest howls outside, but the interior is still, a testament to a patient and a dedicated will. I lean against the glass and I offer up a smile. I know the steady warmth is gonna last a while. The glass arc bending the light around the frame. You do not ask the winter to apologize and fade. You guard my raw edges in the shelter you made. The tempest is blowing, but my soil is secure. I trust the thick crystal and a love I know is pure. The dome holds, the leaf grows, I am warm. Square of thick felt resting on the writing desk, a designated buffer for a complicated task. That writing takes a force and a dedicated hand. You let me push the ink without a punishing return, a tactile sort of comfort that a writer has to earn. The felt takes the tremor and the paragraphs align, a masterpiece of framing, an authentic, honest sign. Strike the metal key, hear the muffled thud. write the honest truth, calm the rushing blood. The desk remains secure, and though I navigate the day, I realize that loving is an isolating mat, a willingness to buffer where the heavy burden sat. You didn't ask to take the iron instrument away. You managed the acoustic and you made the comfort stay. I push the carriage return and I start a brand new line, erasing the anxiety from your life and mine. The typing is a steady and a mesmerizing beat. I pull the finished paper and I read the final draft. A steady survival on a steady floating raft. You don't demand I stop the typing in the dark. You cushion the momentum of I do not have to flinch at every single heavy word. You make the rhythm smooth and let the message be heard. People try to whisper just to keep the echoes low. A timid navigation of the only life they know. But writing takes a force in a dedicated hand, a willingness to strike upon a complicated land. You let me push the ink without a punishing return, a tactile sort of comfort that a writer has to earn. The felt takes the tremor and the paragraphs align, a masterpiece of framing and authentic honest sign. Strike the metal key, hear the muffled thud, write the honest truth, calm the rushing blood. The desk remains secure and the vibrations away. I trust the thick pad as I navigate the day. I realize that loving is an isolating mat, a willingness to buffer where the heavy burden sat. You didn't ask to take the iron instrument away. You managed the acoustic and you made the comfort stay. I push the carriage return and I start a brand new line, erasing the anxiety from your life and mine. The typing is a steady and a mesmerizing beat, a victory secured against a miserable defeat. I pull the finished paper and I read the final draft, a steady survival on a steady floating raft. You don't demand I stop the typing in the dark. You cushion the momentum of I do not have to flinch at every single heavy word. You make the rhythm smooth and let the message be heard. The typing stops, the room is quiet. I am resting.
A rusted iron bracket screwed into the wooden gate. We used to swing the timber back and open up the yard, a welcoming perimeter before the world got hard. The pin was lubricated and the motion was a breeze, a fluent navigation of the summer cedar trees. But seasons bring the moisture and the oxygen attacks, leaving the red powder on the isolated tracks. I walked up to the fence to try and shut the garden out, to build a solid barrier against a rising doubt. I pushed the heavy wood, but the iron gave a groan, a rigid piece of metal turning slowly into stone. The gate is stuck halfway in a paralyzed divide, leaving me with nowhere for my tired soul to hide.
I stare at the decay of a deteriorating heart. Locked on the hinge, freezing the timber in the air. A tragic exhibition of a monumental wear. I try to close the border, but the mechanism dies. I stand beside the failure underneath the fading skies. You cannot shut a door when the iron turns to rust. I stare at the decay of an unrewarding trust. Locked on the hinge, freezing the timber in the air. A tragic exhibition of a monumental wear. I try to close the border, but the mechanism dies. I stand beside the failure underneath the fading skies. You cannot shut a door when the iron turns to rust. I stare at the decay of an unrewarding trust. Try to use my shoulder just to force the ankle shut. The desperate maneuver in the miserable rut, but pushing oxidized material will snap the brittle wood, erasing the integrity of where we always stood. We let the communication weather in the bitter rain, ignoring all the symptoms of an escalating pain. The fence is just a gaping and an uncooperative ghost, a cruel and jagged mockery of what I needed most. Push the heavy pine, feel the iron bite, fail to close the gap in the fading light. The structure is an obstacle that I can never fix. I am tired of the rusted and the unrewarding tricks. I realize that forcing an immovable defense is volunteering entrance to a miserable sense. Love requires a motion that is capable and free, not a frozen bracket separating you and me. We ruin the foundation by ignoring the decay and watch the vital boundaries slowly wash away. I step away from the gate and I leave it in the dirt, accepting the reality of this unrelenting hurt. I walk into the avenue and turn my collar high. I do not try to close the gap and whisper a goodbye. Locked on the hinge, freezing the timber in the air. Let it drop. A tragic exhibition of a monumental wear. Time to stop. I try to close the border, but the mechanism failed. I surrender the illusion to the sorrow that prevailed. You cannot shut a door when the iron turns to rust. I leave the broken bracket and I navigate the dust. The gate is stuck, the wind blows through. I am done. Rubber hiding in the silver tap, a tiny little barrier upon a daily map. We turn the metal handle to control the rushing stream, a functional mechanic in an ordinary dream. The water stopped precisely when we shut the pressure down, a satisfying silence in the center of the town. But rubber loses moisture when it suffers in the dark. I twisted down the handle to eliminate the flow, expecting the reliable and steady end, I know. But a singular drop escaped and hit the metal sink. I think the gasket was a cracked and a deteriorating shell, a visual translation of an agonizing hell. The seal is compromised and the liquid bleeds away. I try to turn the lever, but the rubber refused to bind. You cannot hold a boundary when the texture turns to stone. I stand beside the basin and I navigate alone. The brittle seal failing to stop the water drop. I try to turn the lever, but the rubber refused to bind. You cannot hold a boundary when the texture turns to stone. I stand beside the basin and I navigate alone. I try to twist the silver past the designated line to orchestrate a rescue of your history and mine. But grinding down the metal just destroys the inner thread. It amplifies the sorrow of the bitter words we said. We let the vital empathy dehydrate in the heat and manufactured nothing but a miserable defeat. The dripping is a metronome of an unrelenting pain, a steady accumulation of an undeniable rain. Turn the silver knob, hear the waterfall, fail to seal the gap. I cannot save it all. The reservoir is draining and the surface is destroyed. I walk away from fixing this intimidating void. I realize that forcing a depleted rigid ring is volunteering entrance for the pain. The echoes bring, love requires disciplinist to hold the water back. Not a broken circle on a devastated track. We ruin the foundation by expecting it to last without providing maintenance to navigate the past. I leave the dripping faucet and I walk out of the room, accepting the finale of the undeniable doom. I step into the hallway and I grab my heavy coat. I leave the sinking vessel and the fading tired boat. The brittle seal, let it trailing to stop the water drop. Let it drip, I try to turn the lever, but the rubber had to fail. I surrender the illusion of a complicated tale. You cannot hold a boundary when the texture turns to stone. I walk into the avenue and leave the mess alone. The tap is leaking, the sink is wet, I am leaving. Bought them fresh. Yeah. Yeah. Bought them fresh with a rigid spine, taking steps on a rigid line, blisters forming on the early days. Navigating the crowded maze, they felt a bit tight around the heel, trying to figure out the way I feel. But miles of walking break the rubber down, crossing every pavement in the town. The fabric gives and the edges bend, becoming the thing on which I depend. The friction wears the stubborn soul, adapting to the pressure of the role. A mold is taking shape inside, a custom fit where my worries hide. The rigid structure fades into the past. We built a comfort designated to last. Worn out souls in a faded lace, finding peace in the molded space. We walked the miles to break the limits down. Now you are the safest ground. I found, you know, the exact dimension of my stride. A custom contour where my steps reside. Worn out souls in a faded lace, finding peace in the molded space. We walked the miles to break the limits down. Now you are the safest ground. I found, you know, the exact dimension of my stride. A custom contour where my steps reside. People chase the shine of a brand new pair, but they do not know the value of the wear. I see the creases marking up the toe, recording every single place we go. The rough terrain is easy to ignore, because I have the cushion on the floor. You took my shape and gave me room to breathe, the solid ground that I will never leave. Tie the faded string, feel the rubber give. This is where I stand, this is how we live. The friction left a blessing in disguise, a perfect fit before my very eyes. I realize that fighting for a pristine look is skipping all the pages in the book. Love requires a wearing of the base to settle down and recognize the place. We lost the polished finish of the start to engineer a refuge for the heart. I tie the knot and step into the street, accepting the perfection on my feet. Worn out souls in a faded lace, tie it up, finding peace in a motor space. Safe and sound, we walk the miles to break the limits down. Now you are the safest ground. I found you know the exact dimension of my stride, a custom contour where my steps reside. The soul is one, the fit is right. I am walking.
A blank canvas waiting in the frame. We started out without a proper aim, a single stroke of color on the white, trying to get the composition right. We made mistakes and painted over lines, creating complicated, rough designs. The flat dimension did not hold the weight. We had to push and always recreate, another layer added to the base, a thicker texture in the given space. The arguments and trials leave a mark. We do not scrape the history away. We use the heavy colors of the day. The surface is uneven to the touch, because we added and we built so much. Heavy layers on the linen sheet, making the messy scenery complete. A shallow picture never tells it all. We mix the shades to answer every call. The thickness of the paint is how we survive, a rugged masterpiece keeping us alive. Heavy layers on the linen sheet, making the messy scenery complete. A shallow picture never tells it all. We mix the shades to answer every call. The thickness of the paint is how we survive, a rugged masterpiece keeping us alive. I run my fingers on the dry and blue, a bump of crimson representing you. It takes a lot of pigment to endure, to cover up the doubt and make it sure. The smooth illusion is a basic lie, real devotion piles to the sky. You cannot see the bottom through the red, but every single layer is a work we set. Mix the oil and shade, cover up the tear, leave the texture rough, build a structure there. We turn a simple error to an art, a microscopic mountain of the heart. I realize that wanting it pristine is missing out on what the colors mean. Love requires a piling of the grace to add another coat and find our place. We buried the resentment in the green and crafted the most complicated scene. I stand back and admire the rugged view, accepting the dimension I built with you. Heavy layers on the linen sheet, pile it up, making the messy scenery complete. Deep inside, shallow picture never tells it all. We mix the shades to answer every call. The thickness of the paint is how we survive, a rugged masterpiece keeping us alive.
case is polished in the light. The numbers on the dial are painted bright. I turn the metal crown to start the beat, expecting the familiar warm repeat. But inside the brass, the edges slipped away. The tiny little teeth began to fray. I wind the mainspring to the maximum line, but nothing catches in the grand design. The gears are spinning in an empty void. The transfer of the motion is destroyed. We move around but we never connect. A silent failure we could not inspect. The metal turns but nothing moves the hand. A broken system I now understand. Worn out gears in a golden shell. A silent heaven turned into a hell. I twist the crown but the motion is dead. We spin in circles in the things we said. You cannot force the metal to align. A hollow ticking at the end of the line. Worn out gears in the golden shell. A silent heaven turned into a hell. I twist the crown but the motion is dead. We spin in circles in the things we said. You cannot force the metal to align. A hollow ticking at the end of the line. You look the same from the outside view, but I can feel the missing parts of you. The friction used to push the hour ahead. Now it just scraping sound instead. I keep twisting the knob out of habit and fear, hoping the connection will just appear. But iron wears down to a dusty trace, leaving an illusion on a smiling face. Turn the silver wheel, hear the empty spin. Lose the solid grip, let the silence in. The energy is wasted on a broken core. We cannot push the needle anymore. I realize that cranking an exhausted spring is never gonna change a single thing. That requires attention and a catching tooth, not a spinning cycle hiding from the truth. We let the friction ruin the internal state and closed our eyes until it was too late. I put the heavy pocket watch inside the drawer, accepting that the time is ours no more. Worn out gears in the golden shell. Let it spin. Silent heaven turn into a hell. Close the crown but the motion is dead. We spin in circles in the things we said. You cannot force the metal to align. A hollow ticking at the end of the line. The hands are still. The gears are worn. I am done.
A square of yellow written with a pen. I press it to the drywall once again. A message of the love we tried to keep. A promise made before we went to sleep. It stuck to the wall in the early spring. A minor detail but a major thing. The seasons pass and the chemical dries. A fading grip right before my eyes. The corners curl and separate from the paint. The bond is getting microscopic and faint. I smooth it out with the palm of my hand, trying to force it to secure a stand. But gravity pulls at the floating edge, pushing it over the invisible ledge. I apply the pressure, but the glue is gone. We lack the basic strength to carry on. Falling down from the bedroom wall, a piece of paper answering the call. The note to preserve the little words you wrote. But desperate repairs never look the same. A pathetic attempt at a losing game. It falls to the floor in the middle of night. A silent surrender without a fight. The paper is thin and the meaning is cold. A temporary story getting old. Press the yellow square, watch the corners lift. Feel the logic slide, watch the meaning drift. The surface is rejecting what we put above. A slow decay of a temporary love. I realize that pressing on a dried out seam is acting like a fool inside a dream. Love requires a friction and a holding tag, not a piece of paper turning back. We lost the vital chemistry we had before and fluttered like a feather to the floor. I sweep the yellow square into the bin, accepting the reality I am living in. Falling down from the bedroom wall, watch it drop. Piece of paper answering the call. The strip is turning into dust. A clear reflection of our broken trust. You cannot make it hold without the paste. A final message going to a waste. The wall is bare, the note is gone, I am leaving.
A piece of brass upon a heavy door, a shiny fixture from a hardware store. It started out with sharp and rigid lines. The metal felt like against the skin, a stubborn barrier to let you in. But years of turning took the edge away. The daily friction of a busy day. We pushed and pulled upon the metal sphere and left a little imperfections here. A tiny dent upon the outer curve, a testament to how the metal served. It lost the factory polish and the glare to build a better surface we can share. The metal warmed under a steady hand, a physical transition we understand. The dented brass burning in the night, on out handle getting everything right. We lost the rigid borders we possess to engineer a place where we can rest. You cannot keep the sharpness if you stay. I turn the heavy sphere and it opens the way. The color shifted to a deeper gold, a better story than the one they sold. I wrap my fingers round the gentle dome, a tap-top confirmation I am home. It recognizes every single grip, a flawless motion without any slip. The damage made it better than before, a perfect entrance to a safer floor. Turn the heavy weight, feel the friction slide, step across the frame, leave the cold outside. The dents are just a record of the touch, a minor damage that we love so much. I realize that staying sharp and clean is hiding from the things we really mean. Love requires a wearing of the shell to open up the heaven from the hell. We ground the edges down to make it fit and never found a reason we should quit. I push the door and leave the world behind, accepting the perfection we design. Oh, the dented brass turning in the night, a worn out handle getting everything right. Step inside, we lost the rigid borders we possess to engineer a place where we can rest. You cannot keep the sharpness if you stay. I turn the heavy sphere and it opens the way. Ooh.
a silver blade inside a plastic case, a little mechanism in its place. We used to grind the wood and lay us down to make the sharpest pointer in the town. A lethal tip that easily could break, a fragile weapon for a drawing's sake. The graphite snapped when we applied the force, the consequence of an aggressive course. We shaved the timber till the edge was thin, a competition neither one could win. But metal loses tension in the grind, a subtle alteration of the mind. The razor edge became a gentle curve, a different kind of purpose to observe. The steel cannot slice the way it did before. The rigid conversations exist no more. The dull blade turning in the dark, a gentle motion making up a mark. We lost the need to cut each other deep. Around the logic we decided to keep. You cannot draw a picture with a broken leg. I take the softer angle that we made instead. The dull blade turning in the dark, turning in the dark. Gentle motion making up a mark. We lost the need to cut each other deep. Around the logic we decided to keep. You cannot draw a picture with a broken leg. I take the softer angle that we made instead. We used to argue with a bitter tone, sharp defense to navigate alone. But time is taking off the lethal bite. We do not have to conquer every fight. But dullness is a blessing in the end. Around the surface of a loyal friend, the words are heavy but they never slice. A peaceful rhythm we did not sacrifice. Turn the little wheel, let the timber fall. We do not need the point, we can save it all. The friction left us better than the start, a blunted weapon pointing at the heart. I realize that keeping up the edge is walking on a terrifying ledge. Love requires a blunting of the steel to truly recognize the way we feel. We wore the metal down to save the wood and settled in a place of understood. I pull the pencil from the turning wheel, accepting the tranquility I feel. The dull blade turning in the dark, round it out, a gentle motion making up a mark. Keep it safe, we lost the need to cut each other deep. Around the logic we decided to keep. You cannot draw a picture with a broken leg. I take the softer angle that we made instead. The wood is smooth, the edge is gone. We are fine.
A plastic shell upon a marble floor, a heavy burden heading for the door. It used to glide upon a set of four, a flawless journey we could not ignore. We packed the memories inside the zip, a perfect balance for a final trip. But navigating on a rocky street, we took a damage to the feet. A single roller snapped and rolled away, a quiet casualty of the decay. Nothing remained to carry all the weight, a compromised and miserable state. I have to tilt the handle to the side, a heavy compensation for the ride. The balance is destroyed and the angle drops, a miserable dragon that never stops. The missing wheel scraping on the ground, a heavy silence making up a sound. I try to pull the luggage in a line, but nothing is behaving by design. You cannot force emotion when the base is torn. I drag the broken vessel, feeling worn. The missing wheel scraping on the ground, a heavy silence making up a sound. I try to pull the luggage in a line, but nothing is behaving by design. You cannot force emotion when the base is torn. I drag the broken vessel, feeling worn. The plastic scrapes against the concrete path, a brutal demonstration of the math. You were the vital corner of the frame. Now I am pulling the uneven blame. My arm is aching from the awkward lean, a tragic ending to a hopeful scene. The luggage holds the weight of all we said, but I am just exhausted and misled. Pull the silver bar, hear the plastic scrape. We cannot find a fix, we cannot find escape. The journey is a punishment to bear. I stop the motion in the open air. I realize that forcing in advance is ruining the final given chance. Love requires a balance on the base to smoothly navigate the open space. We lost a vital pillar of the trust and ground the plastic bottom into dust. I dropped the handle on the avenue, accepting that I cannot carry you. The missing wheel scraping on the ground, let it drop. The heavy silence making up a sound. Time to stop. I try to pull the luggage in a line, but nothing is behaving by design. You cannot force emotion when the base is torn. I leave the broken vessel in the morning. The bag is heavy, the wheel is going and I am stopping.
A golden nib upon a heavy pen, I pick it up to write to you again. A sleek design, a metal end of glass. We used to pour the letters on the sheet, a liquid translation of the heartbeat. But leaving it uncapped upon the desk allowed the vital moisture to arrest. The dark liquid thickened in the core. A silent closing of the open door. I pressed the metal tip against the page, a desperate reaction to the cage. But nothing flows to signify the mind, a hollow indentation left behind. The reservoir is full, but the channel blocks, a complicated puzzle with no locks. The dry ink failing on the white. I try to force a sentence from the gold, but the chemistry is broken and cold. You cannot write a future with a clogged up vein. I scratch the empty paper in vain. The dry ink failing But the chemistry is broken and cold. You cannot write a future with the clogged up vein. I scratch the empty paper in vain. You look perfect from the outside view, but I cannot extract a word from you. The surface of the paper takes a tear, because I push the metal in despair. The silence is a heavy thing to read, a total failure of a basic need. We look like we are functioning and fine, but we cannot produce a single line. Push the golden tip, scratch the empty space, fail to leave a mark, lose the final grace. The fluid was the empathy we lacked, a devastated system turning black. I realize that pressing on the dry is just another way to tell a lie. Love requires a flowing of the truth to constantly revitalize the youth. We let the communication turn to stone, and now we hold the instrument alone. I put the golden cover on the top, accepting that the writing has to stop. The writing fitting on the white, try to force a sentence from the gold. The chemistry is broken and cold. You cannot write a future with the clogged up vein. I leave the empty paper in pain. The nib is dry, the page is blank. I am quiet.
A cotton thread woven in a gray machine, a formal shape sitting in the display scene. It started out with a rigid and tight design. It felt a little rough upon the skin, a stubborn border closing at the chin. Yeah. But months of wear and break the fabric down, taking every journey in the busy town. The cotton yields to the motion of the head, loosening the tension of the woven thread. The collar sags and drops upon the chest, the compromised structure making up a nest. It lost the pristine condition of the store, becoming something that I value even more. The tight perimeter surrenders to the pull, a better logic than the factory rule. The stretched collar resting on the bone, a faded fabric feeling like a home. We lost the tension we carried at the start to engineer a comfort for the heart. You cannot breathe when the border is precise. I wear the loose fit and I pay the price. The stretched collar resting on the bone, a faded fabric feeling like a home. We lost the tension we carried at the start to engineer a comfort for the heart. You cannot breathe when the border is precise. I wear the loose fit and I pay the price. Yeah. People throw away the garments when they fade, but they ignore the history the stitches made. I run my thumb along the wavy seam, a physical remainder of a waking dream. It takes my shape and gives me room to move, a daily rhythm in a comfortable groove. The pristine shirts are hanging in the dark, but you are the one that left a gentle mark. Pull the fabric down, feel the cotton give. This is where I hide, this is where we live. The flaw is just a proof of all the days of perfect logic in a messy maze. I realize that keeping up a flawless show is missing out on all the things we know. Love requires a stretching of the seam, fit the reality and drop the dream. We wore the edges out to find a space and built a sanctuary in this place. I pulled the gray shirt over my weary head, accepting the comfort of the loose thread, the stretched collar, resting on the bone. Feel the space, a faded fabric, feeling like a home safe embrace. We lost the tension we carried at the start to engineer a comfort for the heart. You cannot breathe when the border is precise. I wear the loose fit and I pay the price. The shape is lost, the fit is right. I am resting.
A plastic key resting in the center row, the longest button waiting for the hand to go. It started with the texture of the matte design. We pressed it down to make a little space, a necessary gap to keep the pace. The letters on the board remain the same, but the bottom center lost the factory game. The plastic turned into a shiny glass, a consequence of all the days that pass. My thumb connects to the surface every night, a steady rhythm in the monitor light. The friction smooth the barrier away, a silent witness to the things we say. The matte finish is erased by the touch, a shiny record that we care so much. The faded spacebar glowing in the dark, a worn out center leaving up a mark. We pressed the plastic down to build a gap, a vital breathing room upon the map. You cannot write a message in a single block. I touch the smooth shell turning in the clock. The faded space bar glowing in the dark, a worn out center leaving up a mark. We press the plastic down to build a gap, a vital breathing room upon the map. You cannot write a message in a single block. I touch the smooth shell turning in the clock. The other keys are looking fresh and new, but they do not hold the memory of you. The shine is evidence of all the words, a flying flock of the digital birds. I rest my finger on the polished plane, a solid shelter from the digital rain. It takes the impact of a heavy thought, a priceless damage that cannot be bought. Tap the shiny bar, make the empty space, separate the line, find the proper pace. The wear and tear is a language of its own, a solid proof we are never alone. I realize that preserving the original state is ignoring the dimension of the fate. Love requires a wearing of the key to separate the letters for you and me. We polished up the center of the board and validated every single word. I pressed the long button at the end of the line, accepting the connection of your mind and mine. The faded spacebar glowing in the dark, press it down, an alt center leaving up a mark. We press the plastic down to build a gap, a vital breathing room upon the map. You cannot write a message in a single block. I touch the smooth shell turning in the clock. The plastic shines, the words are clear. I am typing.
Glass balloon. glass balloon. A glass balloon sitting in a metal base, a promise beacon in a lonely space. We screwed the bottom in the copper thread, expecting illumination overhead. But metal gets exhausted in the burning heat, a fragile wire failing to repeat. The glass is clear and free of any dust, but deep inside the tungsten gave a snap, a microscopic and impossible gap. The switch is on, but nothing turns to gold. The room remains impenetrable and cold. The current travels, but it finds no bridge. A fatal falling off the inner ledge. The broken filament hiding in the clear, silent ending to a glowing year. I flipped the switch, but the wire is dead. A dark conclusion to the things we said. You cannot make a fire when the core is torn. I stare at the ceiling, feeling tired and worn. The broken filament hiding in the clear, silent ending to a glowing year. I flipped the switch, but the wire is dead. A dark conclusion to the things we said. You cannot make a fire when the core is torn. I stare at the ceiling, feeling tired and worn. From the outside street, a perfect couple going to the beat, but all the energy goes down the drain. A pointless voltage traveling in vain. The spark requires a connection to ignite. We lost the tension and we lost the fight. I shake the glass and hear the rattle sound. The tiny pieces fall into the ground. Turn the plastic switch, feel the empty flow. Watch the shadows stay, let the illusion go. The hardware is a useless empty shell, a cold descent into a quiet hell. I realize that forcing an electric shock is wasting time upon a broken clock. Love requires an unbroken line of wire to handle the voltage of the inner fire. We snapped the vital cord inside the brain and stood in darkness hiding from the pain. I unscrew the bulb and drop it in the trash, accepting the reality of the flash. The broken filament hiding in the clear, let it go, ending to a glowing year. Stay dark, switch but the wire is dead. A dark conclusion to the things we said. You cannot make a fire when the core is torn. I leave the empty socket in the morn. The glass is cold, the line is cut. I am leaving.
A piece of steel folded in a black design, a heavy clamp to keep the pages in the line. We squeezed the silver handles to the back to hold the history upon the track. The tension bit into the paper edge, a solid boundary on a narrow ledge. But metal gets fatigued from holding tight, and in this pressure fighting through the night, the inner spring expended from the strain, a silent giving up inside the brain. I squeeze the arms but the resistance drops, the iron mechanism simply stops. The pages slide and slip from the embrace, a messy avalanche occupying the space. The grip relaxes and the structure slides. The grip relaxes and the loose clip failing at the seam, a useless anchor of a broken dream. I try to clamp the papers in a stack, but nothing holds the heavy volume back. You cannot bind a story with a weary spring. I watch the white pages scattering the rain. The loose clip failing at the seam, a useless anchor of a broken dream. I try to clamp the papers in a stack, but nothing holds the heavy volume back. You cannot bind a story with a weary spring. pressure turning us to fools. The constant tension wore the metal thin, a losing battle that we couldn't outwin. The document is flying to the floor, the chapters are disconnected anymore. I try to gather up the scatter white, but the sequence is ruining the light. Push the silver on, feel the empty space, watch the logic fall, lose the holding grace. The clamp is just a decoration now, a silent witness to a broken vow. I realize that forcing an exhausted bite is picking up a disconnected fight. Love requires attention in the core to hold the meaning tight and ask no more. We stretch the metal far beyond the peak and turn the foundation tired and weak. I throw the useless binder in the tray, accepting that the papers fly away. Use clip failing at the seam, watch it slide. Useless anchor of a broken dream, let it fall. I try to clamp the papers in a stack, but nothing holds the heavy volume back. You cannot find a story with a weary spring. I leave the scattered pages in the rain. The steel is weak, the pages fall. I am done.
A heavy yarn woven in a winter blue, a layer of protection meant for me and you. We bought it in a season when the wind was cold, a defense against the weather growing old. The fabric felt a little stiff upon the arm, a formal kind of shield to keep us from the harm. But seasons of the washing break the fibers down, carrying the armor all across the town. The edges of the cuff begin to fray and pill, a texture that the factory could never fill. I pull the sleeve across the knuckles of my hand, a comfortable logic that I understand. It lost the rigid shape it had upon the shelf, becoming an extension of my inner self. The cotton yields and leaves a fuzzy trace, a custom fit inside a freezing place. The frayed sleeve hanging on the wrist, a woven sanctuary rising from the mist. We wore the armor down to make a better skin, a comfortable shell to let the winter in. You cannot find the warmth inside a pristine coat. I wear the fuzzy armor like a steady boat. The frayed sleeve hanging on the wrist, a woven sanctuary rising from the mist. We wore the armor down to make a better skin, a comfortable shell to let the winter in. You cannot find the warmth inside a pristine coat. I wear the fuzzy armor like a steady boat. The outer layer shows a bit of wear and tear, a visible remainder of the time we share. The thread is getting loose around the bottom hem, a tiny imperfection like a hidden gem. I do not want a garment that is fresh and tight, I want the woven shelter in the middle of the night. You broke my strict defenses with a steady pace and wrapped me in a fuzzy insecure embrace. Pull the fabric down, feel the winter breeze, stay inside the wool, put the mind at ease. The damage is a badge of honoring the cold, the priceless little blanket getting brave and bold. I realize that preserving the original thread is leaving all the chapters of the book unread. Love requires a wearing of the outer shield to navigate the snow upon the open field. We washed the rigid borders till the fibers broke and found a vital meaning in the words we spoke. I wrapped the heavy sweat around my weary spine, accepting the protection of your heart and mind. Sleeve hanging on the wrist, pull it
A woven sanctuary rising from the mist. Keep it warm. We wore the armor down to make a better skin, a comfortable shell to let the winter in. You cannot find the warmth inside a pristine coat. I wear the fuzzy armor like a steady boat. The yarn is warm, the chill is gone, I am warm.
A little piece, a little piece of plastic in a vibrant red, a tiny little engine for the things we said. It started with a triangle of perfect lines. We held it in the fingers to approach the wood, striking all the metal like a rhythm should. But playing all the music takes the edge away. Friction on the copper every single day. The corner wears into a smoother kind of slope, a physical translation of an endless hope. It hits the string and leaves a better kind of sound, a resonant perfection. We finally found the sharpness is erased by all the melodies. We traded up the logic for a state of ease. The plastic bends to match the human touch, a minor instrument that matters very much. The beveled pick striking in the groove around it, little engine making people move. We wore the rigid borders into something round to dig a little deeper in the vocal sound. You cannot play a chord without a little wear. I strike the ringing metal in the open air. The beveled pick striking in the groove around it, little engine making people move. We wore the rigid borders into something round to dig a little deeper in the vocal sound. You cannot play a chord without a little wear. I strike the ringing metal in the open air. We used to pluck the strings and make a bit of noise. A couple of beginners acting like the fools and boys. The sharp attack was giving us a heavy tone. Of friction is a teacher we cannot deny. It shaves the rough intention as the days go by. The smooth attack delivers an amazing grace, a perfect little cadence in a happy place. Hold the tiny shape, hit the silver line, let the ringing last, make the weather fine. The damage makes the music flow a better way, a worn and steady partner for the everyday. I realize that gripping to a sharp design is leaving all the harmony far behind the line. Love requires a shaving of the pointed peak to generate the resonance the lovers seek. We ground the plastic down against the turning gear and engineered a melody I want to hear. I strum the final chorus with a steady hand, accepting the vibration I command. The beveled pick striking in the groove around it, little engine making people move. We wore the rigid borders into something round to dig a little deeper in the vocal sound. You cannot play a chord without a little wear. I strike the ringing metal in the open air. The edge is gone, the chord is bright. We are playing. A circle made of nylon in a shade of black. We used it to secure the tangled mess of hair, to gather up the chaos in the morning air. It gripped the heavy volume with a solid bite. But stretching out the rubber takes a heavy toll, a gradual exhaustion of a vital role. The inner core snaps and the fabric gives. I twist around the fingers in a double loop, but nothing keeps the order in the dropping group. The tension is a ghost and the strands escape, a messy resolution of the final shape. The elasticity is gone and the circle falls, a silent failure echo in the stretched band, slipping down the strand. A useless little anchor in an empty hand. We pull the limit farther than it could endure, and ruin the foundation that was once secure. You cannot hold a knot without a gripping base. I watch the fall in pieces in an open space. The stretched band slipping down the strand, a useless little anchor in an empty hand. We pull the limit farther than it could endure, and ruin the foundation that was once secure. You cannot hold a knot without a gripping base. I watch the fall in pieces in an open space. I try to add a twist to make the center tight, a desperate illusion of a fading light. But giving extra turns will only break the thread, a physical rejection of the words we said. The bond is just a fraction of the former size, a miserable truth before my weary eyes. The hair is spilling over on the shoulder blade, erasing every promise that we ever made. Twist the failing ring, feel the anchor slide, watch the structure drop, nowhere left to hide. The rubber gave its everything and now it dies, a sad and undeniable surprise. I realize that forcing an exhausted grip is setting up the vessel for a sinking ship. Love requires attention in the very core, to hold the scattered pieces and demand for more. We stretched the vital boundary to a breaking pain, and ended up with nothing but the falling rain. I dropped the broken circle on the wooden floor, accepting that it binds us up no more. The stretched band slipping down the strand, watch it fall, a useless little anchor in an empty hand. Lose it all, we pulled the limit farther than it could endure, and ruin the foundation that was once secure. You cannot hold a knot without a gripping base. I leave the falling pieces in an open space. The tie is weak, the grip is gone, I am falling.
A stick of wood resting in a painted tray, a glowing little ember burning through the day. We lit the scented powder to disguise the room, to cover up the tension and the coming doom. The smoke ascended upward in a twisting line, but fire turns the solid into something pale, a grey and fragile column breaking in the gale. The burning reaches down into the wooden core, the scented smoke is filling up the air. No more the ash collapses down upon the painted grain, a powdery remainder of an empty pane. I try to wipe it off, but it begins to smear, a dirty little stain upon a broken year. The fire dies and leaves a grey debris, a fragile dust remaining here for me. The cold ash crumbling on the wood, a tragedy developing right where we stood. We burned the final inches of the hope we had, and left a ruined picture looking dark and sad. You cannot light a fire on a pile of dust. I sweep the grey remainder of a ruined dust. The cold ash crumbling on the wood, a tragedy developing right where we stood. We burned the final inches of the hope we had and left a ruined picture looking dark inside. You cannot light a fire on a pile of dust. I sweep the gray remainder of a ruined trust. We thought the rich aroma would outlast the night, believing in the magic of a tiny light. But fuel is a limit that we cannot cheat, a tragic mathematics of a slow defeat. The breeze from the window blows the dust around, a messy little consequence upon the ground. The fragrance is a memory inside the head, but I am staring at the dirty mark instead. Blow the fragile dust, watch the powder fly loose, the painted sensei. The long goodbye, the burning was a camouflage to hide the crack, a momentary pleasure fading black. I realize that striking up a fading match is waiting for a miracle we cannot catch. Love requires a timber that refuses burn to weather out the damage and demand a turn. We lit the final powder to pretend we care and vanish like a vapor in the open air. I take the dirty vessel to the kitchen sink, accepting every consequence I feel and think. The cold ash crumbling on the wood, blow it away, a tragedy developing right where nothing to say. We burned the final inches of the hope we had and left a ruined picture looking dark and sad. You cannot light a fire on a pile of dust. I wash the gray remains